Energy's high now. Amazing. I'm Marco Matos, but I'm not important at all. I'm sitting next to Mike Shiwdin, Group Vice President at Wyndham, in charge of loyalty and engagement. And Mike, let's just jump in. I spent 20 years in digital advertising, and I don't think I've ever met somebody with a diverse background as yourself. I think it's 8 years in private equity and Wall Street, and then you became a marketer over the last 12 years in hospitality. Like, how did that transition happen? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I think started out in banking. I think what fascinated about me was in banking was moving away from the transaction and really thinking about, well, what does it actually mean from a consumer value perspective? And so, through actually my banking experience, I got some opportunities to touch a couple hotel clients there, and kind of after that fell in love with the industry, and fortunate now to be up here with you. So,
all right, buddy, gloves are coming off. I'm starting off with some hot hits. You ready? I want one example of a decision you made as a banker in hospitality that totally backfired. It just totally screwed up.
I'm going to talk in generality. I think what fascinated me and made me move to the industry was more, surprise, a lot of M&A fails. And I think why that's the case is the lack of truly appreciating the complexities of any operating model and the consumer value that comes with any brand. And so that was one of the core reasons why I jumped over to Starwood. That started my career in hospitality, and over the last 12 years, I think I've done every single hospitality function I could, ultimately leading to this, which has been really beneficial to see the problems for all angles, right?
So I'll take that one step further. I think we are at the dawn of AI disrupting everything, especially marketing. How do you think about decision-making around what's real, what's not, where to invest my time, what to test, but really what's durable?
Yeah.
Thinking about those mistakes, but also that background you have.
Yeah, I think the core piece for us is just really starting with a problem set, right? And so for us at Wyndham, 93 countries, 8,900 hotels around the world, and across 25 brands. And so when you think about that, we have hundreds of audiences that we have to cater to. And so when we think about MarTech evolution, it's what allows us to scale efficiently, but also what is also going to be extensible across all of our channels, right? And so, looking at partners that we can mature with, as well as lean into spreading out into an enterprise product over the years, helps us, one, keeps costs down, but then two, translate, let's just take an LLM, how do we ensure that our brand voice is consistent so that we're showing up every day, even if it's not a person behind that conversation, in a consistent way to build that brand affinity.
You're talking about brand authenticity.
That's
We're going to come back to that. Yeah. A stat you did not mention is you also have over 115 million loyalty guest members.
That's right, 120 as of June. So.
Congrats, incredible. I guess my question then is, what has the ability to splunk through that data taught you about trends of customers, especially in the hospitality segment where things are just constantly shifting and changing, but you're still trying to keep loyalty?
Yeah, I think, and a lot of us in the room are probably facing this as well. I think consumer expectations from their loyal brands, it's completely evolved, right? So it's no longer about your four walls of your business model. It's really about how does it drive everyday value. And so from a loyalty perspective, we see through our credit card usage, but also through our partners that they're engaging with, is to build that brand affinity, you really have to think about, even outside of a hotel stay, how do I keep that conversation relevant to our customers? And so we've been focused, especially over the last year, of how do we build that diversified set of curated partners to ensure that 365 days of the year, we have an ability to have a meaningful dialogue to you that's relevant to your everyday life.
I love it. So we know Wyndham, huge brand, massive company. What's one capability you're building right now that you think your competitors are just completely ignoring?
I think it's more about finding, and it kind of blends in MarTech and our loyalty goals, is blending in the ability to really find a consistent way to have a dialogue digitally. And so we go back to LLMs. Right now, admittedly, I think every one of our competitors, we have probably 5 to 10 LLMs, depending on the channel, right? And so what that then leads to is very generic conversations. It also doesn't help you teach about your specific brands for us across our 25, 26, if you count Wyndham Rewards as another brand. So for us, we're really focused on how do we evolve our digital tech stack, but then also how do we start to train our brand standards and framework with our MarTech partners to scale content velocity and then have that carry forward up and down the funnel from our brand campaigns, upper funnel on TV, but also down to the in-stay experience. It should be consistent. And when you show up consistently, that's what really has resonated with our loyalty members to stay engaged.
Awesome. Yep. I won't nerd out too much on the MarTech stack, but I have to ask, now that things are shifting and changing so fast, yes, it's cool to test and pilot and bring new partners on. How do you think about firing legacy partners or removing parts of your stack that's probably no longer relevant?
Yeah,
I told you it's going to be a hard-hitting question.
This is going to be a little biased. I think it's very hard to find a partner that does everything well across the board. And so, what's interesting about AI, at least from my perspective, is AI, in a way, starts to democratize MarTech with agentic development that we know is happening today. Right? We should see a proliferation of a lot more competition, which good for the industry because it forces innovation, right? I think partners that we look to slowly roll off our tech stack are those that aren't keeping up with consumer expectations and the interoperability across your MarTech. And so, some enterprise platforms really only work well with their sandbox. And, as we continue to have to find nimble ways with, I think everyone faces, cutting cuts on our marketing spend. How do we find those cost efficiencies? I think that's really important, of finding a partner that's going to remain nimble with you as you mature your tech stack.
As you're evolving then, how do you not build what I like to call Frankenstack? Point solution for X, point solution for Y, point solution for Z, and then we got to build an MCP layer. Like, how do you think about the right platforms that you want to bring to market?
Yeah, I think it's one, not rushing into the next shiny new object, right? Which I think we all, especially as global companies, tend to look for. The other piece to it, though, is for us, we have a good practice of, we have a rolling 3-year plan. And if it doesn't tie into that third or fourth year even, because you should look beyond that third year, in your corporate goal, then you shouldn't be looking into that niche product, right? Or niche solution for that. And so for us, we're really focusing on how do we continue to drive value for the brand? And with that, if it doesn't work from a interconnectivity with our enterprise platforms, then we're just going to move on.
When you think about channel mix, again, as a technologist, I think search is evolving.
Yeah.
I won't say Google search is dying, but it's evolving. How do you think about the next set of channels that you want to be a part of and staying top of mind with both from a loyalty perspective, but also the iconic brands you have?
Yeah, I think what's going to be table stakes for, I think, all of us is personalization or omni-channel, right? We all talk about it. It's really hard to achieve. I think what we're kind of focusing on now is how do you find consistencies in the connectivity between those? And so, for us, we're looking at our own channels. We're actually pretty close to having consistency in our dialogue over the next 12 months. Paid media is sort of, I think, the next horizon that we're all striving for, of how do you find those engagement points and then follow that through the funnel, and then also have a two-way dialogue of how do I learn from engagement on our website to optimize my paid media spend? And so really focusing on opportunities and plug with your product launch in Adora of being a good one.
Shout out.
Congrats on your product launch last night. But I think finding those opportunities to have two-way connection flow, which I think is a struggle for all of us, right? Is there's always a garden wall, historically speaking at least, with our agencies and our internal first-party data. So how do we find breakthroughs through that garden wall, if you will?
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So it sounds like on historical channels, you've done a good job on personalization and content. I think everybody in this room would agree that's the right way to do marketing. But you said you're struggling on paid media. So talk a little bit about the decision to sort of invest and try out something like an Adora, but also where do you want to take it over the next, call it 12 months, given the goals that you've aligned?
Yeah, so especially with a portfolio as diversified as us, Oftentimes, that paid media campaign, whether it's banner, meta, et cetera, banner advertisement or meta placement, that's your first touch point. And so you should be learning from that. And for us, whether that's resort creative or a suburban creative, we should be leveraging that so that when on that first page personalization, leveraging it to our advantage of curating, well, based on your lookalike model, based on your historical behaviors, based on your digital footprint, how do we curate and show your top 10%, if you will, of properties that you have a likelihood of booking? And so that's where we start to tie in our internal proprietary models along with your engagement outside of our garden wall of our own channels to really drive conversion for our franchisees in terms of their hotel demand. But then also this authenticity of providing what is core to hospitality, which is the anticipation of our guest needs, right?
How do you think about adding the layer of speed? So give us an example of something that you've done maybe 2 years ago or last year of speed to market from conception idea to out versus what you expect to go see in the next 12 months.
Yeah, sure. So I think if we take our email communications, right, we send just over 1 billion emails a year, right? Small for some retail outlets here in terms here. But when we think about how we approach it today, we leverage decision engines and generative AI copy placement that 2 years ago we were running 5 A/B tests at a time. Our last broad scale campaign, which is our quarterly promotion for the portfolio, we were running 350 different combinations, and then that gets optimized over a 2-year period. And so that scale through the leveraging AI decision engines and generative AI to kind of push the boundaries of what we historically were comfortable about and test quickly and fail forward, if you will, has really accelerated. And we've seen double-digit engagement opportunities in terms of click-through rates and then post-click-through rates, leveraging the personalized opportunities on our website, 20% improvement in conversion. So tremendous opportunity there.
Amazing. Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I am so fascinated by your investment banking and the PE background. So I've got to ask, when you're evaluating marketing investments in technology, as a marketer, what do you think the financial metrics are that a classically trained CMO is totally ignoring? And I'm really curious about how you think about cost savings versus ROI. Like, walk us through that from a financial lens.
Yeah, I think the big difference that I take with business models or business cases is, historically speaking, at least from what I've seen, it's generally how do I propose a ROAS of my next big campaign? What I found success on is, as opposed to looking at more in a time series of your strategic initiatives. So at the end of the day, all of our goals is how do I make sure my brand is showing up consistently? And so that's a series of planned campaigns over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. And so how do you tie your brand marketing efforts into a longer tail initiative? And now you start to switch it into a more finance-oriented conversation where ROAS is really your top line, but you really should be looking at IRR, which factors in your expense, your time series, your cash flow time series, and then from an NPV perspective. And that then makes a conversation really easy with a CFO to say, hey, over the next 2 years, my next tranche of brand marketing efforts is going to drive Y in terms of enterprise value opportunity for our stock price as a public company. And that's really helped resonate and helped me gain buy-in for a lot of our long tail initiatives that we're working on.
And part of that calculation of cost is really the legacy investments you have. So more hard-hitting questions. You ready? What percentage of your media stack you think is just completely wasted that you want to rip out, which is just going to go back to your top line of revenue?
Yeah, I generally have a rule of thumb that we should be looking at our bottom 10 to 20% of our tech stack, right? And not necessarily that we're replacing it every year. That would just not be possible from a funding perspective. But it forces the collective team of where are the opportunities? How do we build a multi-layered approach to ultimately get to the business case that we were just talking about to get the investment to be more efficient as an organization?
As consumers, we have a ton of choice of hospitality brands, some iconic companies. How do you use marketing technology to give you all an edge? And how do you compete in a very competitive space?
Yeah, what's difficult is, at the end of the day, hospitality is such a simple business. It's really how do you anticipate the needs and act on it, right? And so, when you start hotel management training, the first thing you do is you look for signs of what that guest is looking for, how they walk in the door, are they having a bad day, et cetera. When you think about MarTech, well, if we have all the data in front of us, how do we now build those algorithmic event triggers using journey orchestration or whatever your tech stack looks like to follow through and fulfill that anticipation of their need? And so, for example, if you just came down from Seattle, staying at one of our hotels in New York, right? I know you're a huge baseball fan. How do I make sure that you get a personalized maybe watch party for the Yankees playoff game, right? Well, we can do that through our MLB relationship. And so through our app, how do we ensure that you're curating that when you check in to say, hey, Marco, did you know there's a watch party at so-and-so place, right? And so that is really the personalized treatment that's going to build brand affinity. That is also going to, knowing your affinity, right, also drive you to say, hey, I'm going to stay at a Wyndham instead of a Hilton or a Marriott or one of our competitors, right, the next time around.
I mean, you absolutely just sold me with a Yankees watch party for tonight.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I heard a story you shared once where you stayed at a place with your son, and there was a handwritten personal note. And while you, as a marketing leader, you're like, oh, that's pretty cool, but it kind of made an impression with your son. And to me, that goes to the personalized experience you're talking about. I'm curious, how do we, as brands, how do you continue to do that in an AI-driven world where you're balancing authenticity with all of the data that you have, marketing stacks, et cetera? Like, how do you make that work?
Yeah, I think it's finding, at the start of my career, we did a study, I think it was for St. Regis brand. There's 1,800 different touch points in a guest experience once you check in, right? I think as we move forward and as we go forward with AI as almost a front-facing interface, if you will, it's finding what is truly meaningful for that human-to-human contact and what can you now unencumber them, whether it's a retail associate or for us, our front desk associate, to get handled digitally, right? And so if you think about our hotel check-in experience, well, you know what? Half of our consumers don't want to talk to the hotel front desk, right? They just want to be able to book and walk into their room on a late night flight. So great, let's build that capability. But on a checkout experience or when you're staying at our restaurant, let's help them focus on serving that guest, providing the information to a restaurant on what's your favorite wine, the last time you stayed at another full service property. And that surprise and delight moment, while cost the restaurant nothing at the end of the day, that'll get them to return back to their outlet and therefore drive value to our franchisees.
So how do you do that and do that authentically for, you said, 25 brands?
Yeah.
Like that does not seem like an easy task.
That's why we all have jobs. It's not easy. I think the reality of it is we're trying to approach it through the lens of the loyalty umbrella, right? And so if you can now speak in an authentic way that's true to our mission statement at Wyndham, which is making travel possible for all, the reality of it is how do you start to now segment it into bite-sized pieces, right? So for us, that potentially means our limited service or budget brands, right? The Super 8s, the Days Inn of the world. We approach it in a singular fashion, whereas a registry collection or Wyndham Grand, where you're $800, $900 a night, your guest expectations are different. And so if you can start to break it down into components, if you will, it becomes much more manageable. And so that's our initial approach. Of course, as we get more mature and we get smarter of how we leverage our AI tech stack, we'll look to then bring it down to the brand level. But I think starting in a crawl, walk, run approach is always successful, and it allows you to fail fast, learn from it, and then continue to improve upon it.
You mentioned earlier about getting leadership buy-in through some of these core financial metrics. I'm curious, you're obviously a marketing innovator yourself. How do you bring the change management to your organization when diversity of brands, authenticity, AI tools coming from every which way, and, we got to hit revenue? Like, how do you execute that change?
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I've always tried to bucket in things into multi-year strategies for buy-in is it gives the team a little bit of breathing room. one of your questions, similar, is what do we also miss from these tech initiatives? It's sometimes failing to think about the people and process, right? Technology is an upfront investment. Without people and process, none of the value realization actually comes to life. And my personal opinion is you can't force that to a team. They have to learn the value of that over time. And so, for us, our focus is how do we ensure that there's a reasonable ramp for us to make mistakes, right? One of our optimization engines that we kicked off this year, first quarter, we actually lost revenue, right? In the small sample sizes, but now we're trending at 18+% improvement, right? And so part of that was just storming of the organization, right? And being able to do it in a bite-sized piece where we learned where it wasn't detrimental to the business, and we were able to recoup that in other areas through other engagement touch points, was allowed the team now to mature, become champions of that change management. And whether I'm there or one of my direct reports are there in the next 6 months or what have you, that's now going to be a core ethos of the corporate culture, and that's ultimately what's going to drive long tail value for our stockholders, right?
So I'm hearing long-term plans,
Yep.
focus on metrics, and test and learn, and almost like human in the loop.
Yeah.
What else are we missing?
I think it's just not getting complacent, right? Sometimes something works, so we lean into it, and then we put blinders on. The reality of it is, like with AI, consumer behavior is going to change. It's going to evolve quicker than ever. MarTech is evolving. I feel like we're in a new page every 6 months now. And so, making sure that there's also those change champions in your team that questions the status quo. It's helpful to always make sure that we're not getting complacent and then ultimately losing our competitive edge of being a tech-forward hospitality company in our case, but regardless of your vertical, constantly trying to strive for new and differentiated ways to engage with your customers.
So you mentioned that transformation. I think we're all, as consumers, feeling it. Give me a hot take. In 3 years, we're going to not be doing X, and we're going to be doing Y.
That's interesting. I think in 3 years, I think the way we go to market in terms of paid media is going to be very different. So today, at least hospitality, a lot of our focus is on driving the next stay. I think we're losing the opportunity, though, with all of our first-party data, the notion that people don't travel to stay at hotels, as much as I hate to admit that. People travel for experiences. And so how do we start to evolve our marketing strategy to focus on the experience? Our hotels are a gateway for that, but ultimately focus on how do we supplement our product with the main reason why people travel, which is for the experiences, whether it's business travel, traveling with your family, friends, going to a music festival, or whatever the case might be.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How do you balance the different, the requirements or the goals when you are working with the franchisees, when you're working within your team, when you have the focus around revenue, but specifically, how do you bring all of these competing needs and interests together and say, here's the marketing stack that we need to go in, here are the bets we're going to go make?
Yeah.
How does that operationally work?
I think it's more about layering. I don't think it all comes into one, right? So you have your short-term demand funnel, if you will. That always has to be there because we have stakeholders, we have franchisees that we have to meet, we have revenues to hit as a public company. But then creating those small pockets of incubators, if you will, to fail, a safe environment where we could try new ideas, have a fun to actually test and learn. And you know what? Celebrate the failure culturally is so important, right? Because you can't take risks, you're not going to innovate, as you can appreciate launching a new product. And so, I think that gets lost with especially a lot of large companies is without that incubation period, you're never actually going to gain your competitive edge. So finding the balance and keeping it in a small, manageable size that may or may not be visible to your CFO, and it works out that way.
Are you speaking from experience?
Maybe.
Okay. I understand the test and learn. I like this idea of like a skunkworks team that has a little bit of freedom to make some mistakes. But the reality is everybody and their mom is disrupting marketing with AI today.
Yeah.
So how do you sift through the noise, decide these are the 5 bets we're going to go make, and then create the freedom for that team to go execute, to your point, without fear of failure?
Yeah, so I think it's everything has to go back to your brand values, right? And so if it aligns with your brand values, your brand ethos, then ultimately that is your safe space, because even if you failed forward in a particular use case, you're still making progress of ensuring that your brand is resonating with your guests in some way. So to me, that creates that safe environment to then test into. I think from a longer term perspective, it's just doing the appropriate due diligence, right? I think oftentimes we rush to hit a budget timeline. The reality of it is our environment, we're always in an evergreen environment. And so, yeah, it's okay if something takes 4 to 6 months longer. The reality of it is we're trying to create value that takes 5 years to build a brand, right? 3 years to build a brand. So in the grand scheme of things, really not rushing to market is important. And building that storyline, which I think is just over time, building a track record with your executive team of, yeah, it may take 3 months longer, but the efficacy is there and it's been a proven track record for the team, right?
When you take a long-term approach and a view of how to build a brand and build that loyalty, we've heard a lot of enterprises talk a lot about moving with the speed of culture. How do you balance those two, where trends start on a Monday and they're gone by Friday, but you're thinking about the next 3 years and how to get somebody from 2 stays to 3 stays?
Yeah. So I think that's where it becomes really important to think about your product as an ecosystem or a lifestyle ecosystem, because that allows you to act nimbly as quickly as those cultural moments pop up and then go away, right? And so not the best example of a pop up and go away culture, but next year, right, FIFA World Cup, right? How do you remain true to your brand, but also take advantage of a global platform that should bring a halo to any one of our brands in the room? The way you do that is to ensure that you have a partnership network to tap into and quickly gain traction in that way. So really thinking about your partnership ecosystem from a loyalty perspective, at least, but I think this goes for any business model of ensuring that you have a contact point that can be relevant regardless of what's going on in the world.
So we're almost at time, and I have to always ask this. I want one thing that you see around AI and marketing that you truly believe is real, and then give me one thing that you think is just total BS. Like, that's just don't even waste your time.
Oh, I think concierge type services or AI search in the consumer journey is going to be a true dynamic that we all have to solve for. Expedia has done it. I think Shopify actually just launched an activation with ChatGPT. I think that's truly real. That's a consumer behavior shift. And frankly, I actually just met with a partner of ours for lunch today, and he chose the restaurant through ChatGPT. And so I think that's a real consumer trend. I think the area that I'm not fully bought into yet is this notion that agentic optimization is something that's scalable at an enterprise level. I think there are opportunities that will really see fast maturation, and then other areas where agentic capabilities are just going to take 5-10 years to really mature to handle the complexities of our business model, right?
Earlier, you were talking about paid media. We talked about search shifting. You talked about experiences shifting. What are you expecting out of the next 12 months with the investment you're making in marketing technology, and specifically the things you see that are real with AI, like Adora? What are you expecting out of this?
Yeah, we talk a lot about the tech platforms. At the end of the day, it really matters on your consumer engagement. And so, this year we've seen through a variety of metrics that I won't bore you because I think we have a minute left, is double, triple-digit engagements in certain pockets of consumer engagement. And so everything we do from a MarTech investment perspective is how do we build a stronger relationship with our consumers, and how do we build a better flytrap, if you will, for new consumers to enter into our system. And so that's what our core focus is. I think for the next 12 to 18 months, we've now laid the foundation from a MarTech perspective. Now it's partnering on building the full funnel marketing campaign that takes advantage of our MarTech platforms to really scale across our 25 brands and continue to grow our loyalty program at the double-digit rates that we have been over the last 2 years or so.
Mike, this was an amazing conversation. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.